Good morning. I'm going to try to do a video today. Was intending on doing one last week, but I was sick. Voice not totally back, but fair enough. Now, this video is going to be not necessarily response, but more of a more of my 2 cents on the subject of character backstories. And this is inspired by a video by Loki's Lair where he talks about player character uh, backstories. So I have some points I want to add, and I'll read them off to you. Okay, so I'm going to give you some examples of how I run, uh, kind of what my prerequisites are for backstories in my games. I'm going to give an example of my experience as a player, and then, just some final thoughts. So, here's how I normally do it. Level 1, if I start you out at level 1 in a campaign, the campaign is the backstory. You don't get a backstory. Who's your mom and who's your dad, and what did you do before this? And that's about it. You're not going to be a military veteran. You're not going to be a magic school professor. You're not going to be a high ranking priest or a master class pickpocket or something like that. It's not going to happen. I've done campaigns where I've started people off at level 3. And so for level 3, you get one small event. Like a small event being like your mom and dad died and now you're forced to have to go out and try to fend for yourself, something like that, something very insignificant. And there's a 10% chance to have possession of a magical item, because I think at level 3 you've kind of might have been traveling the road for a little bit and kind of stumbled on a few little oddities here or there. Level 5, you can put one significant event, such as partaking in a fairly large battle. Um, just as an example, and you have a 20% chance of having a magical item. Level 5, you're kind of considered more experience, closer to the end of the road of your journey, because, to put it quite bluntly, I rarely run anything past level 10. Level 10 and up, if I start you out at level 10 and up, one major event and class-based magic item. Now, um, here's the deal. Levels 1 and 3 I have done for campaigns. Levels 5 and up are more for one-shots and adventures. I'm not taking as many great pains to create a world in a one-shot or in an adventure than I am in a campaign. You know, so uh, so you can literally put whatever you want, and I'd be okay with it, because the adventure is just if we're picking it up, it's just to break up the monotony of a longer campaign. Let's put it that way. Like, we want to play, but we want to play something different. Get away from this for a minute and play this, you know, and try out higher level play and stuff like that. So generally, I'm not creating a world with any kind of feel to it. It's just kind of like, I just go by whatever the rules say, and player characters make up whatever they want, because again, I'm not putting that much work into it. I'm literally just slamming a couple dungeons here or there, maybe a couple towns, and there you go. I'm not fleshing out any kind of world. Whereas levels 1 to 3, yeah, you're gonna be, and I rarely do level 3 anymore, because I've gotten to introducing people at level 1. You start off at level 1, and you know take from there. Although if you were somebody who was a previous player, and you had a character die, if you're willing to spend the gold that was in their bank account, so to speak, you can transfer that over to the next character. But the surviving player characters have to like plan a funeral and stuff like that, uh, so some kind of consequence for dying, um, but I rarely do level 3 campaigns anymore. Campaigns level 1, one shots or adventures levels 5 and up. So backstories are not for the campaign, because the campaign is the backstory. Um, but you can have a backstory for adventures and one shots, and I'm okay with that. Something in the hobby that I feel like we should use instead of backstories is backgrounds. What do I mean by that? Well, one of my players, Brian, in the Mortal Coil Discord group, he ran us through a Beck-Me basic game, and he started us off at level 2, and basically you know 3d6 down the line, you pick a career out of your path, off of a list, and or you can randomly roll it. And well, my character had really high strength and really high charisma. Charisma was better than strength, I remember that. And the background, the previous career he had, we were started at level 2, so like he's been an adventurer for a little bit, right? So he was already going to have a retainer come with him. But the career he had before he became an adventurer was he was a privateer, and then we were given some traits to pick from that don't really have any kind of effect in gameplay. It's just something to kind of flesh out the character feel a little bit more. And I chose leadership, even though he was not a leader himself. Um, I came up for Renault, which would be his name. That he was he was a skilled privateer. He wasn't a captain. He wasn't even an officer on the ship, but he was just kind of one of those guys that kind of helped keep morale high, and and like keeping his head cool and collected under pressure. And so there you go. I had everything I needed for Renault from a role playing perspective, and that works. And I think honestly, that's how we should do it. Pick out a career that makes sense for an adventurer to have had beforehand, um, and give them a trait to role play with, right? So, in my opinion, that was honestly my favorite way of running it. Loki in his video brought up Xanathar's Guide, and that's also another good source because Xanathar's Guide has a lot of like, uh, who are your parents? How many siblings do you have? It gives more details if you care for that kind of thing. But if you don't, finding a random table to roll a previous career and picking a trait that's reflected in your attributes, it's not a bad idea. Now we're going to get to the final part of my video, which I'm going to be more ranty than I normally am. And that is, in Loki's video, he received he actually received quite a bit of pushback for this video, which was kind of surprising. And the video has more nuance than I could ever do it justice. You'll just have to go watch it for yourself. That's Loki's Lair, Lokislair. So Loki's Lair. You'll see a long-haired British guy with a mustache. So like in his profile pic, so you found it. As of the date of this video. Anyways, probably the most kickback he got back were from very obvious 5e players, and I think the one that stuck out the most was the accusation that he is a lazy DM, that a good DM should should fit a character's backstory into their game world, whether they like it or not. And a good GM could do this. Well, they use the term DM, but this is how I know this is a 5e player. So, I want to talk briefly about what my marks of a good game master is, okay? And this is relatively subjective, but in my opinion, I believe it's objective. I believe that every good GM has these marks, and bad GMs lack these, and in fact have the polar opposite. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. But the marks of a good GM, a good game master, is that they are fair and unbiased. Remember, the GM is a referee. They are the adjudicator of the rules, and they are the middleman. They are the third party that the players are going to work through to interact with the world around them. They are they are making sure that the player characters and the monsters and NPCs are all playing by the rules. Now, granted, because the GM is controlling the world to some degree, um, obviously there are some instances where they're going to lean more heavily in favor of the world, but by and large, they're going to let random tables and dice rolls and reaction rolls dictate what their world, how the world is going to interact with players, and they're going to most of the time, an instant death like a rock falls out of the sky for no reason is not going to happen. Uh, so a good GM has the heart of the game in mind. They realize that without players, they have no game, but vice versa. Because you can, as a GM, you could do without one or two players. But if you don't have a GM, you don't have a game at all. That world doesn't exist. So, you can lose a few players, but you cannot lose your game master. A good GM is also assertive. Now, this is something that you can look in the real world and definitely tell too. What are really good leadership quality skills? One of them is being assertive, being stern yet fair, not letting people treat you like a doormat, but also being open and aware and open minded uh, to the to the thoughts, opinions, and conditions of the people around you. That's how it should work, though. But notice I said good leadership, not bad leadership. We know that there are bad leaders out there in the world, so don't misconstrue what I'm saying. Um, and a good game master has a vision for their world, and they stick to it. For example, uh, in my world that I'm creating right now, an Aarakocra will not fit. There will be no Aarakocras, which I'm planning on running it, of course, or OSR anyway. So like there is no Aarakocra there. But if an Aarakocra was in insert whatever OSR game you want into this scenario, Aarakocra wouldn't be there. You're not going to play an Aarakocra, okay? Um, Paladins are not going to be a thing my in my world that I'm working on. Um, which I'm almost done with. Well, to some degree, it's almost playable to at least start play with. So, um, but a good game master has a vision, sticks to it, and doesn't let the player characters bend them to try to reshape their world around one player character. Now, the marks of a bad GM are as follows, and they are the polar opposite of it. So instead of being fair, you have favoritism and cronyism. So something that I see a lot, and this is very prevalent in 5e crowds, is you will have particular players, one player out of the whole entire group that wants something ridiculous, stupidly broken, that is terrible and overpowered, while everybody else is underpowered. Or the game master allows them to be a rich PC while everybody else is scraping by off of what they find in dungeons and in the wilderness. This is unfair. This is favoritism, and in some cases, nepotism, cronyism. So it depends on who the person is that's getting the favorites. It's funny that main character syndrome is quite prevalent in these railroady, um, more modern games than they are in OSR games. That's not to say that they don't happen in OSR games. They certainly do, but they're quite unheard of. I've never seen an example. Let's put it that way. Another mark of a bad GM, instead of being assertive, they're spineless. They won't put their foot down. They let people walk all over them. They're a doormat. They're not somebody to be respected. If if somebody is that spineless over a game, then they don't need to be in the role of a game master. They're it's not cut out for it. We hear all the time, oh, D&D can be for anybody. Yes, it can be for everybody, but it's simply not for everybody. That's that's just the matter of fact. And same thing with being a game master. Anybody can be a game master, but well, yeah, anybody can be a game master, but being a game master is not for everybody. There are some people that are not cut out for that role. And another mark of a bad GM is they have no concrete or vision for their world. So now realize that what I'm saying is your world has a feel, it has an aesthetic, and you have to pick and choose what monsters and what races fit and don't fit, into your world. Not everything from the bestiary is going to be found in my world, but some people just make it such a stinking free for all that they'll allow anything to come in, and because they're spineless, and they'll let players walk all over them and say, "I want to bring in my Aarakocra," and they'll be okay with it. Well, now this world that didn't have Aarakocra suddenly needs to have Aarakocras to make sense for the Aarakocra player character. So what are you going to do? And when the world does not have a vision, there is no verisimilitude. And because there is no verisimilitude, there is no immersion. I take immersion seriously. Now, I don't have my players do silly voices at the table, although we do have one that does like to do voices, and we're okay with that. I'm cool with that. Like, hey, it's just not my personal thing. But, you know, I take immersion seriously. If you break immersion, well, you're guess what? You're going to get an XP penalty because you're making the other player characters suffer because you don't want to make this world believable. This world has to be believable. It has to be. There's absolutely no reason why anybody shouldn't put their foot down and have a concrete vision for the world. If you were not going to have a concrete vision for your creation, why did you even become a game master to begin with? It's one thing to say, I'm just going to let the random tables decide, and that's fine. I'm cool with that. But most of the time, they're not doing that. They're making something from scratch, and that's cool. And they had a vision, but then they let somebody change that vision, and that's not a respectable vision. Again, to reiterate the point, when the world is no longer believable because now you've introduced something fantastic for the sake of one person, you can kiss your immersion goodbye because nobody will believe in it. They're not playing in a world anymore. They're playing in an obvious game. Like, they don't believe it now. Because the whole point of gaming is to kind of forget about the real world for a few hours. Relax. But I've said all I can say on this subject. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Hope to catch you guys next time. As always, guys, take care. God bless. I'll see you on the other side. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the subs and the likes. Take care, guys.